Hello, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Kermit Whitfield, a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and Chief Strategy Officer for United Way of Central Ohio. It's great to see you all here today. During today's CMC Forum, we will hear our community stories from the horrible world of human trafficking, a reality for far too many that most of us, frankly, are unaware of. Recent news has brought to light the ugly reality of how predators use coercion, promises of money or fame to manipulate the young and the vulnerable. We turn to our experts to learn more. Please welcome the CEO of One Divine Line to Health, Esther Flores, Commercial Services Director at CleanTurn, Melissa Reinhard, and we had hoped to have the victim's advocate and bailiff for Judge Paul Herbert, Vanessa Perkins, but duty called. She is a bailiff, and she had to be in court today. So to finish out, we will please welcome our host, journalist of the Columbus Dispatch, JoAnne Viviano. JoAnne, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm going to just let our speakers do the talking today as much as I can. And so let's just start with what is human trafficking? What does it look like? What is the scope of it? How might it be different in Columbus than maybe our suburbs or rural areas? What does it look like?
Thank you, JoAnne. I think it's important for everyone first to know what the definition is before we describe the faces of the victims that we work with and the survivors. Human trafficking is defined by the U.S. Department of Justice as the recruitment, the harboring, the transportation, the provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Think about this, 1865. The end of the Civil War. That was the year that slavery was abolished, supposedly. It's still in existence today. At any age, a person could be exploited in different forms. How? By forced prostitution, labor, begging, criminality, domestic servitude, marriage, and organ harvesting by being drugged into the act. It's not only happening abroad, it's happening right here in Columbus. Do you want me to describe the faces now?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you've seen from some of the survivors, victims of these crimes.
It's important for you to understand that the women, the transgender, and the children that we work with, they're not they're not sex toys, they're not objects, they're human beings. They are someone's child, someone's daughter, a parent, an aunt, a relative. Unfortunately, there are people out there that think otherwise, but I'm here to speak for the voiceless. They're traumatized. They come from different states. They were trafficked here. We have girls from Alabama, New York City, Texas, Washington, D.C. In California, we have girls from San Francisco and San Diego here on the west side. Unfortunately, I would love to do more, but with all the issues that we're having on the west side, that's where my focus is. What's so sad also is that we have girls who are runners from the foster care system. We have also unborn children. Do you know that I'm working with 5 women who have no prenatal care and they're being trafficked? That's happening on the west side. Kids, teens aged out of the foster care system right on our streets. Mistreated, raped, tortured, groomed in dog cages on Sullivan Avenue. Unfortunately, human trafficking on the west side is tied to the opiate epidemic. Not one child, not one woman, not one transgender wanted to be a prostitute. And if you can learn something today, take that word out of your vocabulary. Learn. They're destitute people, children who lack love. But this is why One Divine Line to Health is here, and Sister Nadine, and CleanTurns. We treat them with utmost respect, and we're about giving people second chances, because the answer, the antidote for human trafficking, it's in one place, and everybody has it. It's in your heart. It's called love. That is the antidote. That is the remedy. Hatred, evil. Flip the word evil. It's about making people understand you have the right to live. The only problem is that when they're traumatized and they're in unsafe communities, what happens is that they need people with compassion, like us, to spend time with them in the dope houses, in the trap houses, in the alleys, in the streets, and give them the opportunity that they want. And it's just basic necessities, the accessibility for basic necessities. Lastly, let's talk about the mental illness. All of them have post-traumatic stress disorder. They're depressed, they have anxiety, they have agoraphobia of institutions. This is why, I'm in seclusion right now in a house, because I'm being accused of running a prostitution ring, that I am a madam, when I'm only showing the girls what love is with our supporters. You gotta understand that part of the fear is what causes all the mental issues. On top of that, let's talk about their physical appearance. They're thin, they're fragile, they don't have time to even eat food. They've been drugged, okay? So what happens is, they get exposed to conditions such as sexually transmitted infections, HIV, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. And unfortunately, because of the open wounds, they are MRSA infected. We have nurses in our organization, Diane and Marguerite, myself, we clean their wounds. But I'm risking my life because when I was working in a hospital and in the nursing home, I had a gown, and I can't wear gowns, and I can't not wear a scrub because the women are traumatized, or is a trigger if I'm wearing scrubs. For that reason, we don't even have cops, at the drop-in center, Uniforms is a trigger. So we gotta understand that the social economic status, it doesn't discriminate in human trafficking. We have daughters of judges out there. We have cops, relatives that are out there. We have social workers, ex-felons, we have teachers. Ethnic, we have the United Nations, unfortunately, out there, and the girl who's biracial is worth a lot more on the streets. We have a Mexican-American girl by the name of JoAnne, whose mom is a Mexican immigrant, and we have many more girls out there like that too, They're so concerned about, protecting themselves because they don't want to be deported. Guess what? When it comes to immigrants in our city that have been here for a long time, the ones who are preparing the meats that we eat, the ones who are picking up the vegetables and the fruits that we eat, they need help. And they are afraid to report it to the cops because they feel like they're being deported. It's not about politics here. The reality is that they're human beings. They are human beings. And if you can understand that in the eyes of God, it doesn't matter your sexual preference or what religious group you belong to, you were made in the image of God, which means you're a community. It also means that you have equal rights. And that is why, Abraham Lincoln, believed in women, And let me tell you a little story about Abraham Lincoln. He loved women in a good way because he had a personal encounter with Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is one of my icons. She had a shotgun on one hand, and she would tell the person, hey, you only have two options, am I right? Either you go forward or you're gonna die. Okay, right now, today, she would be considered a coyote. Today, she would also be considered a human trafficker. And the reality is like, even if I wear that label or someone wants to label me that, it's about exile from fear, from sadness, from devastation and despair, into life, into love, and the pursuit of happiness, the fact that we were made to be equal. So we need to know more and more about this. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to show you, express to you, the faces of human trafficking here in Columbus.
And so what's out there? What are some of the things that are being done to prevent this from happening, to assist victims? How is our community responding? How is law enforcement and the judiciary responding as well?
I love it. Yeah, Esther does a great job. She is like on the ground, in the thick of it, working with people who are still caught in this life. And so she has a great perspective and a powerful perspective that you just heard of kind of what this can look like, and just even the complexity of it all, that each story is different. When we talk about human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion, that covers so much. You know, unfortunately, I think a lot of times people, when they think of trafficking, they think of the movie Taken and picture Liam Neeson going in and kicking butt, getting his daughter back. And that could be true in some cases, but more often it's a more subtle form of, you know, someone's life kind of getting out of control, or someone's like someone not knowing their value, getting into a relationship, getting into drugs, those things kind of leading down a path that kind of puts them in a place where they're on the streets. And I think you did a great job of even explaining, like taking away that stigma of women who are on the streets, that it's not, no little girl is dreaming of that life. And so I think being on the west side too, CleanTurn is located on the west side. We're here on the west side now. And this is kind of, we're in the thick of some of it. And so I'll quick tell like a couple stories. So just because we come at things from a little bit of a different perspective at CleanTurn. So we're a social enterprise that our goal, we're providing professional cleaning and interior demolition services to our customers. So we are a for-profit, self-sustaining business, but we exist to provide supportive employment opportunities for people who are coming out of challenging backgrounds. Recognizing that a lot of times when people are coming out of things like human trafficking, addiction, incarceration, potentially a mix of many of those things, which is a lot of times what happens, there can be barriers to moving forward beyond that life, even when people are really ready to take some steps forward. And without a job, without support, without community, it's obviously very hard to get anywhere in life. If you would imagine losing your job today and not having any opportunity, that would put you in a pretty hard situation. And so that's kind of who we are. And so we tend to see people who are a little further down the road in their recovery and in coming out of some of these challenges. So I think of one story of one of the women who's a team lead with us on our night shift, who, just to give you another face of kind of human trafficking, she had a pretty normal life growing up. Had some, would say that she probably had a little bit of a struggle with alcohol, but co-owned a restaurant with a friend in her adult life, and her marriage fell apart. And in that moment, in that kind of life-changing situation, she turned, the alcohol just got out of control. And things just started to unravel. And the alcohol led to pills led to harder drugs, and once heroin entered the picture, things just totally fell apart. And that's a lot of times what you'll see if you know much about the opiate epidemic and heroin. It takes your life, it controls everything, and you do everything to get your next fix. You will do anything. You will do things you never thought you would do, is what our staff would say, to get that next fix, because you're so physically addicted. And so she ended up on the streets in Columbus, and she was there for about 10 years. She was actively using that whole time, and in the midst of human trafficking, prostitution. And she thought she would die there. I mean, she really thought, this is where my life is. This is it. And Actually, I'll speak to Catch Court because what happened is she caught some charges and she was given the opportunity to enter Catch Court, which since Vanessa's not here, and this speaks to your question, because I think there is a really great network in Columbus that addresses kind of the complex issues of human trafficking. I'm actually constantly encouraged by the different people who are involved in this space. But Catch Court stands for Changing Actions to Change Habits. We were just reviewing this, yes. And it's a specialty docket here in Columbus that works with women who are coming in with prostitution charges, and they're given the opportunity to enter this specialty court and receive like recovery. It's basically a recovery, holistic recovery program rather than serving time. And so they can opt into it. It's voluntary, which is important. And our staff member, I'm just going to call her Jane, I'm not going to use her name, but she opted in, and it was kind of like this was a lifeline for her. And she went through the entire program. It's a 2-year program. It's not easy. And graduated, and she has been working with us for about 1.5 years. So when she was probably 6 months into the program or so, she started working with us. And she is just a joy. Like, she brings joy and positivity everywhere she goes. She's a team lead with us now, and that means she's like leading other staff members. She trained up someone else who was on her team to become a team lead. And so it's just like, it's such a journey, especially like you hear about what's going on the streets, and it's a mess. And that's kind of like what it looks like here in Columbus. It's very messy, it's very complex, but there is hope, and I think when you hear stories like that, you see the humanity. You know, she didn't look like this joyful, positive person when she was, 3 or 4 years ago. But here she is in a completely different space. And I think her story, too, speaks to the different services and organizations and individuals who are involved in this space and creating opportunities for people's lives to change who are stuck in this life. And like from the people on the ground who I'm sure she had some people who were interacting with her on the streets, giving her glimpses of hope, and then ending up in Catch Court, and that, like, just the power of that community and experience. And she still is connected. They have like a butterfly program where people can kind of stay connected, and because community is so key in recovery. And so I think what we see too from an employer perspective, and we are a very unique employer in that we care a lot about people's holistic like life and growth. What we see again and again is that what makes the difference for people is when they're involved in like a really like a network that surrounds them, and they stay connected in that network with people who are really in it with them and care for them and are providing in different ways for them, with housing, with employment, with recovery, with counseling, trauma recovery, because we need that, people need that. We need a community that surround us. Like all of us need that. So yeah, I think it's exciting to be part of, in a space where there's so many people involved who really care. Yeah.
So we heard your example, thank you for sharing that, of a woman who was trafficked and how devastating that was for her. Well, this is really devastating for individuals. What does it do to a community to have this problem in the community? What does it say about us? What does it do to us?
And I would just like to add, ditto, to Melissa, because the situation here, the problem, I call it's a mega multifaceted problem. And the reason why it's because it's tied to opiates. You know, and what we have to understand is that opiates increases the libido. It's just a part of the brain, you know, that is affected. It's the midbrain, you know, and I'm not gonna give you all the medical jargon. So that is the motor sensory part of the brain. So drug traffickers do know that the drug and the human traffickers know that if they inject, or even if the woman pops some pills, you know, they're going to be more reactive, you know, sexually. But every second, you know, every 30 seconds, a woman is being trafficked. Just understand that, okay? Over 80% of the women, of the people involved in sexual bondage are women and girls. Over $150 billion a year is generated in this dark world, and over $50 billion is generated here in the United States. Nationally, listen to this, and I'm sorry I was a little loud there. Nationally, Ohio rates 2 years in a row. Second for opiate overdose deaths, due to the geographic location that Ohio is, you know, the way it's positioned. We have major freeways that take you to Canada, New York, name it, you know. It's pretty popular. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is, you know, officials ignore the frontliners. On 2018, the National Human Trafficking Hotline reported that in the state of Ohio, there was only 219 cases. You hear that? 219. That also included labor, commercial, you know, street, you know, prostitution, you know. But here on the hilltop, on the west side, One Divine Line to Health, you know, that's the nonprofit that I'm a founder of, we saw 1,250 females. Again, 1,250 females. That's how many we served. On the, at the drop-in center, 12 transgender, and we had access to 50 children. Fueling this is that the Hilltop also has the highest infant mortality rate of 15.5, compared to 8.4% in Franklin County, 7% at the state level, 5.8 at the national level. The numbers are worse when you start looking at the ethnic groups. It is only in the Ohio's capital, an extinct baby kangaroo in the Columbus Zoo has a better life expectancy than a child born on the hilltop. Violence, you can't avoid it. I mean, I almost got physically assaulted last year. So far this year, it's great. No one has attacked me as of yet in the summer. But we need to understand that on top of all of this, okay, we have a transgender community who is also being victimized out there. They get beaten a lot more. They get, it hurts me because I know the women get beaten, you know, but when the John or the date finds out that the person is a guy, you know, they get beaten. Who takes care of them? Well, they come to our drop-in center, or they'll meet me out on the streets or in the alleys, you know, in the Love Bug, and we treat them. But the sad thing about all of this is that when it comes to what's happening on the west side, on the hilltop, is there's so much development happening in Franklinton, you know, there's a migration now of more people. So I know that our numbers are gonna be much more higher than last year. So we have people living in abandoned houses, trap houses, dope houses, in garages, and there's not enough places. You know, this is where the issue is, you know, to help them. We have women who have children. They're afraid to go to the hospital because, you know, you're gonna report, hey, you know what, you have drugs, you know, you have kids, you know, we need to take the kids away, we're gonna report it, you know, to FCCS, and they're afraid. So what's important for us to understand is that the only solution to improve the statistics, I have it, obviously is love, you know, but having a full-time drop-in center. We do not have a full-time drop-in center in Franklin County. The survivors talk about that. The women out in the streets, they need a safe place. You know, it's their place. You know, Sister Nadine has been doing this a lot longer than I have, you know, and she's out there, she can testify. These girls don't have a safe place. There's 2 drop-in centers, you know, in Franklinton, and the total hours between the 2, you know, is actually Hannah, who works with Catch Court, you know, operates the sanctuary from 8 to 10 p.m., And then Como, 6 hours, during the week, and we are only 4 hours. So remember, 1,250 women that we saw was only 4 hours. Now we're underground, so it's word by mouth. Sometimes people think, oh, these girls have phones. No, they don't. They don't have phones. It's word by mouth. So they know when we gather, and then we also do the canvassing. So, and the cops know, we're working with the cops, finally, 2 trusted cops, and they, instead of locking them up, they'll tell them, hey, go to the drop-in center, I guess that ties to the whole concept of, how is law enforcement involved here? I have some concerns, and I'm glad that there is the restructuring of the CPD. And I'm sure that you are well aware what happened, last year, a young lady, also one of our girls on Sullivan Avenue, was murdered, I have my own opinion because I've been out there 1 o'clock in the morning, late. I have never been physically assaulted by any of the girls. I mean, I have some weapons. I don't carry a gun, but, I have some stuff to protect me. They have never disrespected the person, the volunteers, or the people that are out there. What's important for us to understand is that sometimes we have to look at, what's happening. There's too much. The rules right now basically protects the Johns, not the women, and I know that in the, Constitution, until you're proven guilty, then you're free to do whatever. But right now, my biggest concern is that we're not having our cops, have a little bit more compassion. So with the restructuring, they're going to try to demilitarize it and be more service-oriented. So commonly right now, our girls are being charged for soliciting, loitering, jaywalking, in an alley. Hello, they're homeless, Well, what about if they flip the script and start, charging the Johns the date with soliciting, loitering, and driving in the alley, in their cars? It's just kind of confusing because, at times it's like we know what common sense is, but the law right now is just black or white. And that is a problem. There are some gray areas. So I've been working with some of the higher-ups in the police department this year, because last year the administration ignored my emails and my calls. It took basically almost 6 months this year, and that's because of Commander Hyland, and I thank him, Sergeant Brophy, were advocating, and it's just, it's military style. So a person like me, I'm considered a peon, or civilian. I don't have access to them. So I think that we have to understand that, the law enforcement can do better. I'm not about saying that they're evil people. Yeah, we do have some crooked cops out there. And yes, there's some that are still violating our girls. And I'm glad that sovereign justice took place on April the 4th, where Andrew Mitchell, was indicted for manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter and murder of Donald Dalton. This is the reality here, and what we're trying to do is just more being collaborative in all of our efforts. Those who are on the front lines, those who are involved in the law, Catch Court, Paul Herbert is a good guy. I love him. And I think that we need to stop looking at the unfair treatment of our women. Yes, I know prostitution isn't legal, but there's more to it. And I would love to sit at the table, with other folks, and that's what we're going to try to do, with this new, the new team, is to, maybe listen. I have PowerPoints, I've educated a lot of people about human trafficking and what they can do. But I think the problem is that we need this full-time drop-in center. But thank God, we were advocating for this for, my God, 3 years, and an awesome gentleman, bought me a house less than 2 weeks ago. So right now, I'm just excited. The girls don't know. The volunteers know. So we're just trying to do our fundraising, because we just need our bathroom, and our kitchen renovated to open. That will be the place where we can actually turn things around. And that's what happens is, remember, they're victims. They need to be in a community that is safe. I love the concept of social enterprises. So if there's any business people here, learn from, Cream and Sugar. They're also a local business. They have the best ice cream. Hello. And they also support us. But also, CleanTurn, because they've helped our girls, have a job. Remember, we also have girls that are ex-felons, so if they have aggravated assault, who wants to hire them? If you have theft in your past, Walmart, it's hard to hire somebody, but we enjoy working with them. And also understand that our organization and our website is 1dl2h.org. We also have 2 safe houses, and we also have a community garden. So I understand what's going on not only in the streets, but also after, the recovery. Most of our girls go through CTAP, and they're amazing folks. Carly, love you, because our girls need they need counseling, and they have to have specialists that know how to work with traumatized victims. Did I answer all your questions? Okay.
Well, we're going to give all of you a chance to ask some questions too in a few minutes. So if you want to get in line at the microphone back there, if you have any questions, we'll get to that in just a minute. So what about, you're doing some education here, but what kind of education needs to happen? What does our community need to learn? What do our girls, what do our boys need to understand about what's happening out there?
You got it. I have an answer, and there's a problem here right now, is that, listen to this, in 2013, on June of 2013, the Ohio House passed a bill, Bill 59, and all school teachers are mandated to learn about human trafficking 4 hours, before classes begin, okay? And the problem is that, and they also are supposed to educate, our children, and that is not happening. I mean, ask your kid, do you know what human trafficking is? Has your teacher taught you? Has your hygiene? That's not happening. That's where we need to start, JoAnne. JoAnne, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of another one. And the reason why is because we have 5-year-olds, we had a 9-year-old 2 years ago that was being trafficked. But then again, we have women who are pregnant and their unborn are being trafficked, So we need to start, elementary school. So, and we can be creative. People need to work with us, I teach our children, about opiates. I teach them not to talk to strangers, not to get in to a car, because they see the love bug and they want to come in. I mean, they're allowed to come in, but not every commercial vehicle, but we stand out because ours is red. They have to be very careful because they can be kidnapped. Because a lot of our girls were kidnapped from other states, to Columbus. So education needs to start as early as possible.
Yeah, and I would say too, it's easy to see the problem on the west side. And if you haven't seen the west side in a while, you can just take a little drive around. Go up Sullivan, you'll see a lot. But even in the suburbs, these things are problems. And so I think probably many of you have seen the billboards like Denial Ohio, where we think like opiates aren't a problem, things like that. And these things are happening everywhere. The opiate problem is everywhere. Human trafficking is everywhere. And so even just making sure that we're not blind to that reality, even when we're not seeing it in front of us, because it's there.
And how is that different in the suburbs than what you're seeing on the west side? How does it look different?
It's hidden. And that's really important to also understand is that just because someone is not injecting, an opiate, like heroin, because like on Sullivan, there's no pure thing, there's no pure coke anymore. There is no pure meth because the drug traffickers, what they realize is that because people got afraid that heroin now is laced with fentanyl, they're like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start smoking some weed. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some coke. I'm going to go ahead and get some meth. But the drug trafficker says, oh, no, what we need to do is we're going to have to cut it now with fentanyl. So now people are still addicted to opiates, and their symptoms are still there. And what happens is like, on Sullivan Avenue, you got people coming from New York to buy the drugs because the drugs there are pretty inexpensive, So just because someone in Grove City is taking, some pills, that doesn't make a difference. You're an addict, and it's very affordable to come to Sullivan and buy the pills. So some of the suburbs, what they're doing is they're mostly popping pills, but not to say, there's still people injecting with opiates. And what's happened is that because now there's an increase of people injecting, it's hitting the suburbs, so people are going crazy right now. Literally, they're going frantic because now it's personal.
All right, we're going to head to questions now. It's in the Columbus Metropolitan Club's tradition to take audience questions, When you come, before you ask your question, please say your name and then ask a question. Make sure it's a question. We don't want editorial comments. Questions end in a question mark. So let's start with our first question, please.
Hello, my name is Warren Fishman, and I really appreciate you people coming to give us this information. I really do. If anybody here is a new attendee to our Metropolitan Club forums, I want you to understand that most of our topics aren't this sad and tragic. The question I have is, you talked a lot about, you didn't talk much about the police or what they're doing to help out. You talked, hit that lightly, but you didn't talk anything about what we're doing to catch these traffickers and put them away forever. You certainly can't put somebody away for jaywalking. But so what are the police doing? What's our government doing? What's city council doing? I mean, obviously they know where they are. They're on the west side. What are we doing?
Warren, you're my type of guy, you know. The answer is ignoring the fact that this is the reality, because if the west side is the epicenter, then you need to go ahead and attack the problem there. So this is why I'm here, and I'm grateful that Columbus Metropolitan Club took the liberty to do this, because this is a hot topic and this is uncensored, because my numbers, I'm not making them up, you know, and these are current numbers. I've been talking to the cops, you know, to the higher ups about doing the collaborative, and believe it or not, that's part of what's happening, is that they're trying to work with grassroots movements like ours to work together. You know, the whole jaywalking and the soliciting and loitering, you know, one of the girls came out of jail on Monday, and I was concerned. I thought she was dead, and she told me, I said, oh, don't worry about it, because I'm going to make some time and I'm going to talk with the cops. The only thing we can do is just advocate for them. We need to do something else than just giving them the tickets, you know. And our guys, they're not my guys, but the Johns or the Dates, they're just getting away with it because they have to be caught in the act in order for them to go to jail. And I'm like, it's a probable cause. You know what they're doing, you know? So I think we need to have more community members to even, you know, work with us, because I have some good ideas, and you know, maybe we should start picketing, you know, in some of the corners, you know, and say, not in my neighborhood, you know, not in my neighborhood. This is my child. This is my daughter. Maybe that can help. Sometimes we have to really be a little bit more daring, but it's just following the process, and it takes long. And for me, you know, all this red tape that exists is basically translating to the increase of death toll of the girls and the people that are out there. So I'm sorry, I don't know if this is, I'm answering your question, but there's just too much red tape, and we're trying to work together with the police officers.
Well, thank you. I hope law enforcement knows this forum is televised, and maybe they can watch it and
they know me.
Take some action.
They know me.
Hi, David Moody. I have a couple of questions. The first question is, so for the everyday average person who's sitting here today, what can we do? So, hey, this sounds terrible. I don't want this to happen to anyone I know or anyone at all. What can I do today to make this better? Or how can I, as an everyday, just average Joe, what can I do to help?
Well, we like average Joes that have compassion, and women themselves. I want you all to understand, I'm not making things up. It sometimes seems like it's an exaggeration. Our biggest need right now is to have the drop-in center, because there is no full-time, and we're actually in the hub. We're in the crisis. Once we get that, you know, our goal is to have it up and running before Thanksgiving, because we want to have our first Thanksgiving and our Christmas party. And I have also great connections with other grassroots movements out of Columbus, because right now we don't have enough safe houses that can help women with kids. Our facilities, you know, especially our women are homeless. They don't have identification. But if anything, if you can remember, you know, 1DL2H.org, you know, we are a public charity. Look at what we're doing, and if you're interested in a specific cause, you know, financially, I know this is not really the place to ask for money, but you can help us in that capacity, because I also barter with some of the other grassroots movements, and we share our goods and our resources. So you can look at our website, you can learn, or we can talk more about it. But we definitely need men, you know, when it comes to like helping us with the maintenance of our properties, you know. So it depends on what you're interested in. Word by mouth, you know, education, doing a little marketing for us, it helps, because we do need men in this, you know, in this field. And the problem is that all men are seen like perpetrators and the victims, but not in my eyes. We have good men. And we had 3 good men that donated the properties that we have, 3 out of our 4 properties, so.
Yeah, a few other ideas, because like I mentioned, there are a lot of great organizations like One Divine Line to Health and others that are kind of on the ground, Salvation Army, where you could donate some time to do some street outreach, things like that. And even if you just want a little more education, She Has a Name is an organization locally that focuses a lot on just education about issues of human trafficking. They do I think like monthly or quarterly. Training that's 3 weeks long. That's really comprehensive, and it ends with kind of an invitation to be involved and gives you opportunities of different ways you could be involved. And then from a social enterprise perspective, like CleanTurn, Freedom a la carte, and Legacy Candle Company are a few social enterprises, even Hot Chicken Takeover, that really focus on people who have come out of challenges, providing employment, and kind of supportive, holistic employment, so that people can have a life after some of these challenges. And so even choosing the way that you spend your money and the choices you make, whether you buy just a candle from the store or a candle from Legacy Candle Company, makes a difference in lives. Whether you buy your cleaning from Mary Maids or from CleanTurn, that makes a difference. So things like that, like those are simple, I think a few hopefully simple options for you.
Okay, a follow-up question. So one of the other things you talked about a lot in terms of law enforcement and whatnot is just that the victims have more punishment against them than the perpetrators. So what can be done to kind of help that, hey, John, you committed a crime. You're going to jail. Like, what do you have to do to, outside of catching them in the act, right, to address the fact that they're the ones who are committing these crimes, in addition to the people who are actually doing the trafficking. Like those 2 groups, like it almost seems as if you put them all in jail or just you did something to address that, then you wouldn't have as many victims of these kind of crimes.
Right. That's you're absolutely right about that. And one thing that we're learning right now is, again, is with the new administration, they're trying to take all of this into consideration in us working with them. One of the recommendations was if someone gets caught, you know, give them a John letter, you know, and let them know this is the cost, this is what you're doing, you know, in our community. You know, this is a child, most of the men, by the way, they're older. They're married. Most of all of them are married. Come from affluent backgrounds. We have a judge, believe it or not, pays $250 for a 15-minute entertainment. We have officers, we have doctors, we have lawyers, you know, city attorneys, and we have private. It's kind of crazy because it's like the judicial system is also involved, but we can just treat every person that we work with right now with dignity, respect, and hopefully this new administration will be working with us. You know, great questions.
Do you know, I know the John School exists.
Not
Do you know?
anymore right now.
Okay.
No, and that's another proposal. You know, like this year is all about restructuring, so I gave them 3 pages, and part of it, of the recommendation was to have a permanent John School, you know, on the west side, at least in every 4 corners, so that, you know, the citizens can actually report this, take a picture of the license plate, call the cops, you know, and let them know, hey, I saw this guy pick up this girl. That's what we're talking about. The community has to to be empowered, you know, because we're working directly with the victims. We just need more women power and manpower, because it takes a community to save our women, our kids, and our transgender folks out there.
You've talked, hi, I'm Lainey Cuthbert from the Columbus Metropolitan Club. You've talked a lot about the prostitution issue. And I know that, at least from stereotypically, a lot of us think of nail salons and massage parlors and that kind of thing. And I feel, unfortunately, pretty sure that in my neighborhood, at one summer there was a van going around with young kids. They were sending out for magazines. And I, to this day, regret that I didn't say anything to anyone about that. Are these truly typical other places where this occurs?
Yes, absolutely. It's so sad. You know, we've heard of cases where, even on the west side, a cleaning company, I forgot the name of it, someone just texted me on that they're going around and saying, hey, you know what, you know, we have a cleaning company, we're gonna pay you on the spot, you know, and then they're trafficking them to other places. It's happening, and that's why you have to understand that a lot of our victims, they're afraid of getting into contractors' vehicles, because it's contractors' vehicles that they're utilizing to kidnap our kids, our women, and even our men.
And I think if you see, like,
Call 911.
yeah, call the human trafficking hotline if you have suspicions.
Hi, I'm Bill Lafayette. I own Regionomics, and I'm curious about the traffickers themselves. You said that the girls, the transgendered individuals, come from all over the country. So are the traffickers locally based and just go around the country snatching folks?
We have just a small amount of transgender, because most of the victims that I work with are females, okay? We've had drug traffickers from, it's like they communicate, you know, local to like Chicago or wherever, and sometimes they just exchange girls, but we also have women that are independent, you know, because they have to feed their addiction and they have to feed their children. And what's the curiosity, if you're talking about, you know, what do they do, you know, you have, there's a cop, you know, for the last few years who has been, you know, trafficking the girls, and in exchange he gets drugs, you know. And I can't report him, I know who he is, but it's up to the girl, and that's why we need the drop-in center, because in the drop-in center, we acknowledge their voice, you know, and unfortunately, it's always the girl, even in the court system. She's the prostitute, you know, she got no say, but the John who has money has an attorney and can get himself out of the situation.
I'm glad you're there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would say even something that we've seen and heard from stories as our staff as like relationships where maybe addiction even is part of that relationship, and
The sugar daddy syndrome.
yeah, and then yeah, he ends up asking, you know, here we are in this situation, we need money. Your body is a commodity, basically, and that can be sold and get us money for whatever we need or for drugs. And it's those manipulative relationships that might start out looking like Prince Charming and then down the road, you know, spiral out of control. And so I think sometimes we think traffickers as just like this, again, international, you know, like taken. And that can be true, but it can also be a lot more subtle. And in the context of like relationship, like just really unhealthy relationships.
All right, that is about the time we have. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you for your questions and your attention and your interest. I'm going to hand it back over to Kermit.
Well, that is one of the most sobering and important conversations that I can recall having here at CMC. And we want to thank our speakers today, Esther Flores, Melissa Reinhard, and JoAnne Viviano. And special thanks to all of you. We hope to see you here next week. Thank you.